Another beautiful day for us to talk about the cases and everything happening around Nigeria. Latest and trending stories in Nigeria today. This is Atlantic Television Network and the program is Atlantic Blowout. And Atlantic Blowout is a syndicated live program of the network that features chit-chats and conversations on special interest topics on news, events and stories through correspondent reports, expert opinion and stakeholders analysis. As usual, some of the topics we'll be taking today, we're taking the first one from the National Assembly, where reports have it that reps orders revocation of private airstrip licenses. And a story on electricity. This has been a series. Well, we have reports today that the TCN confirms power restoration in parts of the north. This is one of the stories we took yesterday, and we're promised that in 70, how many hours? That we're going to get a restoration of power in the north, and now we have reports that in some of the states, though not all, power has been restored. We'll also take this story from independent marketers. Ipman writes Dangote over bulk purchase deal. This is a response to Dangote's comment yesterday on marketers not purchasing petrol from his refinery, and that's why we're having fuel scarcity in Nigeria. And then on education, NANS threatens protests over ban on students' unionism. Okay, we're going to, and then we have the story on increased allowance from the national from the NYC. NYC members lament delayed implementation, and then on minimum wage, workers poorer now despite increase. This is a funny one, but I'll find out what my guests have to say about this story. But remember that we are open for advert placement, news, event coverage, personality, society, and political interviews, products, service promotions, and commercials. You can stay connected with us on all of our ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, and on X at Atlantic TV Net. Remember to also watch us live on our website at www.atlanticnetwork.tv. And we'll go on a short break now, and after that I'll let you know who my guest in the studio is. We'll delve straight into the details of the stories. Please stay with us. My name is Enidoye Jackson.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off from food, clean drinking water and essential supplies. Health experts are warning of a potential outbreak of deadly diseases, and medical facilities
Thank you so much for staying right here with us on Atlantic Television Network. We'll delve straight to our stories after letting you know that I have with me in the studio one of my regulars on Atlantic Blowout. I'm talking about no other than Greatman Badon, Pastor Greatman Badon. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Eddie. Good morning, Nigeria.
How are you doing today?
Good.
All right, let's talk about Nigeria. We'll take our first story from the National Assembly. House of Representatives has called on the Ministry of Aviation and Aerospace to halt the issuance of airstrip licenses to private individuals and organizations, including revoking licenses already granted, such as the one recently approved for the Living Faith Church, led by Bishop David Oyedepo. This decision raised by Rep. Suleiman Abubakar Gumi during a plenary session follows concerns that private airstrip could pose security risk. Rep. Gumi emphasized that unmonitored airstrips could potentially facilitate illegal activities, including the importation of firearms and drugs, thus escalating threats like insurgency and banditry. This motion gained traction after Minister Festus Keyamo confirmed the recent airstrip approval for Oyedepo's church in Ota, Ogun State. In his motion, Gumi referenced a 2014 incident involving a private jet associated with a religious leader, which was seized in South Africa while transporting $9.3 million in cash. He argued that limiting private airstrip licenses is crucial for national security, urging that only state-supervised facilities handle air traffic to prevent misuse. The House has now tasked its committees on aviation and legislative compliance to ensure these measures are implemented. Okay, so this is not limited to just Living Faith Church, right? It's for private individuals, even though some people are thinking there's something under the carpet regarding this, since the case study, the pastor that was mentioned, or the church that was mentioned, is Living Faith Church. You're a pastor. I'd like to get your thoughts on this one. Even though I'm not expecting you to be biased anyway.
Exactly. Okay. Is that a setup for me?
No,
I'm a pastor.
I can't set you
All
up.
right. So basically, I think the comments backing the decision of the reps member to raise that argument during the plenary section was very straightforward. I remember in 2014, like he clearly stated, when a clergy was involved in something like this, and it took the news for a long time, and that was a bad scene, because of course religious leaders are revered.
Yes.
And of course, getting to that peak in your religious career where you have been respected across the globe, then we don't expect to hear some certain things about you again. But unfortunately, whether it was true, whether it was an allegation, whether it was verified, or whether it was a setup, we have not been able to clear all of that till date. But we know that such a news came up at a certain time in 2014. So right now, if the reps has said these are our reasons for revoking the license of the private airstrip, then it's something we should look into. I'll look at it from two angles. First of all, what are the measures put in place by the Ministry of Aviation when it has to do with monitoring? Monitoring is essential. Even in the supervised airstrips, you have a lot of offenses going on that are uncovered up till today. A lot of offenses going on that are still covered, and we are yet to uncover them. Because people go through a lot of, you know, how things work most times. People have to go through this and that and that. They're always having to pay this, do that, do that. Funny things happen. And when it now comes to a private airstrip where nobody is watching, then there's a challenge. The news headline captures the Living Faith Church because, of course, it's going to cause a stir, and perhaps everybody will want to look at the news when you say, oh, Bishop David Oyedepo is on the news, so let's see what's happening again. And that's actually what is going on. But like what we saw, private, not just Bishop David Oyedepo, not just the Living Faith Church, but private licenses are to be revoked, and they're supposed to stop issuance of private licenses. So if the Ministry of Aviation can assure us that there's a possibility of ensuring that the proper monitoring is done, regardless of state-owned or private-owned, then we can go ahead with that. And the monitoring process has to be unbiased.
Okay, that's monitoring now, but not revoking the licenses.
Yes, if you want to... The reason why they are revoking the license is because he is stating that there is little or no monitoring for private airstrips, meaning that a lot of illegal activities can take place. Now, if you want the illegal activities to be stalled, what do? Do you revoke the private airstrips, or do you put in place proper monitoring? You know, it's just like what we have in the education sector. You have private universities, you have state universities. In as much as we have private universities, a lot of things will happen there that are not ultimately controlled by the state. But there are monitoring procedures put in place in education that ensures that every educational institution is thriving and working in consonance with the guidelines. So if something like that can be done, then fine. We don't need to revoke the licenses.
That means you're against revoking the licenses.
I'm not against
that's what it looks like.
I'm only providing the
solution. Why are you trying to be diplomatic here?
Exactly. You used the right word. I'm providing the solution.
You hit the point already.
I'm providing a solution.
Don't worry. Nobody's thinking you're being biased. Just speak your mind.
Exactly.
You don't want the licenses to be revoked. You're saying instead of that, why don't we just put in
proper monitoring structure? But the truth has been said by the reps man. He says if proper monitoring is not there, that's his concern. And I'm working with his concern. His concern says no monitoring. No monitoring will amount to to fostering illegal activities, probably. The private airstrip given to the Living Faith Church, for instance, is not going to be used by Bishop David Oyedepo alone. It's going to be used by some of his members, some people who you may not be able to ascertain the source of their wealth, or perhaps the kind of businesses they do, or they may even not be involved in illegal businesses. It could be a friend that could just say, transport this thing for me now through on a private airstrip, and it's just a setup. And once the news blows out, they'll say the private airstrip that was approved for Bishop and its Living Faith Church.
But one would wonder, since they said the report said this happened in 2014, what happened all the while? Why was this not recommended at that time, especially at that time when that incident happened? Why now? And why making reference to the Living Faith Church after it was announced during one of his services that about the license and all of that? Why is it that it's that time that they decided to revoke licenses of private individuals, making reference to something that happened in 2014?
Exactly.
10 years ago.
That is why I stood my ground where I started from, because what has gone down is going to cause a national stir. Whether we like it or not, Bishop David Oyedepo is revered and holds the influence over a large population in Nigeria and in Africa and of course the rest of the world. So where was the reps when the whole decision process, approval of airstrip does not happen in one day? It doesn't happen in one day. So, of course, it took a process. Where were they when this procedure was going on? Why did they not call the Minister of Aviation to order and say, appear before the reps and tell us? Of course, before these things are approved, you don't just approve things, even universities and all, private varsities, you don't just approve them. It goes through presidency. It goes through the legislature as well. They are aware of this approval process. Why did they not stall this process from the beginning if they knew that they had concerns like this? They had to wait until the approval has been done. And that's why I'm saying this is going to cause a national stir. Revoking that license is going to cause a national stir. So what do you have to do to forestall that process? You go ahead and put in place proper monitoring.
But the question is, all the while, why was there no why don't we have proper monitoring in the first place?
But that is Nigeria for you.
In the first place, why don't we have? And it's not a case of it's not being implemented, because you know sometimes people will say, oh, don't worry, we have these policies on the ground, it's just that they're not being implemented. For reps to be talking about it, it means that it's probably not even there. Why are there no provisions for proper monitoring and you're issuing licenses all these years?
Look, let me tell you, the whole system is faulty. Even the 2014 incident that was mentioned didn't happen in a private airstrip. It was in a state-owned It's not a private airstrip that happened. So it goes along with that even the state-owned procedures, the monitoring is faulty. That's why I said that's Nigeria for you. Nigeria we're not proactive. We wait until there are problems ahead of us and then want to start making the news and making fights here and there. Nigeria has to be proactive, especially the leadership. So what I suggest to the reps is, look, you should call in the Ministry of Aviation, set up a proper monitoring team. If we are still having lagging behind us at 10 years ago, up till 2024, that means nothing really has been done about that. It therefore means that our call should go to the reps and the Ministry of Aviation to ensure that they put in place proper monitoring. If you have your monitoring team in all the private airstrips, they will check. Now, what kind of monitoring do you use? Of course, there will be surveillance, use of the surveillance cameras and all. These are all going to aid a transparent monitoring process.
No, that's another thing, transparent monitoring process.
So one of the things we need is a transparent monitoring. Oyedepo holds influence, but should not get away with anything he does because he holds influence. So when you are sending somebody to a private airstrip, for instance, owned by maybe one Senate president or one former politician or one oil mogul, you don't just send somebody there and the person is belittled by the influence of the person. You send a transparent monitoring team, unbiased. If possible, there should be a constant rotation of the monitoring team. No monitoring team is permanent or stagnant in a particular airstrip. Before you know, you cannot say when your transfer will come. So maybe if you have done a shady deal with one person, expecting that you'll be able to stand there and pull the deal through,
they'll just move you.
They'll move you. Transparent processes have to be upheld in our country. That's the truth about it.
Right. I like the fact that you mentioned that, because it doesn't just end at monitoring, like what you said earlier. Oh, this is Nigeria. I don't know why people usually say that. Oh, the Nigerian factors at in play here and all of that. So even if we're having policies on ground, even if you want to talk about implementation of these policies, you also need to think about the monitor that would monitor the monitoring team. All right, let's talk about electricity now. Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, has confirmed the restoration of bonds to calls for Adelabu's removal. All right, let's get to, you know, we have been taking this story as it unfolds, but I have not had you on this show while we had this story. While the blackout was there, while we're talking about the vandalization, some people were saying if we had constant power, we will not have these boys sometimes going to vandalize transformers and all of those things that are happening. It's because they know that when they get there, and they relax to do these things because they know there will be no power until they are done. And that's one of the recommendations that someone had. But now we have the power restored in some parts of the north. Your thoughts on the quick response? Is it even quick? Well, let's get your thoughts.
I think we should compliment it.
Yes.
21st of October, we had blackout. And now this is 30th of October. We have the news that power has been restored as at yesterday, 4:50 something p.m. So that's good news. We should compliment what they have done. I like to throw compliments when good things are done, and of course we also frown when evil reports come in. But this one is a good report, and I urge the Minister of Power, you don't need to wait for Mr. President to call on you or when they have called for your removal before you begin to do. You are there as the eye of Mr. President. Mr. President calling on you is wrong. You are the one who is supposed to present the challenges in your ministry to the Federal Executive Council. So it's important that, so we hope that that happens one day for the electricity tariff discussion that has been on ground. But for this one,
but there have been no promise regarding that. There have been no promise that soon the hike is going to, or the prices, the tariff will
the same way the reps has taken it as a responsibility to call on the revoking of private airstrips, was the same way somebody from the reps also made a presentation before one of the plenary sessions where he said, we want the electricity tariff to be reduced, to be subsidized, because of the hardship it's going to tell on the people. For those using band A, you have to recharge 1,000 naira for 4 units. 4 units, and then how long are you going to use it? If you have a refrigerator in your house or a deep freezer, you're gone. if you're using air condition, you have to be
You
a
sound like
millionaire.
a Band A customer.
I'm a Band A customer.
Oh, okay. Speaking for your people.
So of course, you're using air conditioner, you're using this, you have to start thinking how much will I recharge in a
Don't use
week?
those things.
So
Don't use them. That's the problem. Well, go on.
For comfort, for life and comfort, you cannot.
People started saying, "Oh, I never knew that I could stay without using the air conditioner." So you start realizing things you never knew that you could do.
There are some of us that would not want to compromise our comfort for any reason.
But that's not how it actually is supposed to be.
So we hope that they will listen to
So
our
are you
yearnings
pointing at anything that looks like bias here?
on the
Yes,
issue
because
of
you just made comparison between the response with the blackout in the north and then the tariff hike.
I think the tariff hike is a national affair.
Of course.
Exactly. So there is no bias, because whether you're in the north or you're in the south, you're affected by the tariff.
Even while the power has been restored,
exactly.
you're still affected.
Exactly. So whether you're being restored to power, you're coming back to join us.
But what do you think we can do concerning this power issue in Nigeria? Recently, I know that a lot has been said about the national grid collapse and all of that.
It collapses at least once. I think it has collapsed for about 40 times this year. Yeah.
On whose report? 40 times?
40 times. Go check
okay,
it.
let's go back to what we're saying. But then, I mentioned once on this show that we have currently, from the last time I checked, in Bayelsa State, there's no lights, there's no power. And according to reports and the people I spoke to when I was there, they said for like 4 months, there'd be no power in Bayelsa State. Now, that's on one side. Coming back to other states where there's power, there are parts of those states that have never seen power. There are communities that have never seen power. So we still have a big problem with power supply in Nigeria. What do you think we need to look at in addressing this issue?
Okay, first of all, you asked a question about bias. So if I want to talk about bias now, I'll look at why the quick response in the north and why 4 months down the lane, no good response in Bayelsa. Because I was also in Bayelsa some weeks ago, and I also experienced that. Not, so you may point a bit of bias there as to why this swift response here and not there. Second thing is, I feel that to a large extent, privatization studio, you do this, do that. You will be more strict on your staff.
Maybe you should explain what you mean by absolute privatization, because we all know that when we talk about power in Nigeria, it has already been privatized.
Yes, absolutely. The whole process of power has to be privatized. It's not entirely privatized. It's not. This whole electricity distribution is privatized to an extent. Power installation and all of these things have not been privatized. Now, let's look at the communities you mentioned, for instance. If we say a community has no light for years, what can be done for this community to have light? So let's imagine that a private sector in charge of power installation in River State, for instance, goes around all the communities, does their need assessment to ensure that they have done this needs and impact assessment and seen that, oh, haven't done the needs assessment, these people do not have power supply. Haven't done the impact assessment, is adversely affecting them in this area and that area. Their businesses are not thriving because of this. So at the end of the day, we are recommending to the state government or recommending to this that this should be done. This community, that community lacks light. At the end of the day, you realize that there will be a swift response than when you leave everything in the hand of the government. You have communities who have never had light at all.
They don't know what
at the end of it, they don't
like.
even know what it feels like to have a refrigerator at home, because you cannot have a refrigerator when it's not going to be powered. And then at the end of the day, you realize that it becomes campaign promises. Campaign promises.
And it has been over and over again.
Of course, and then
my God. So be on the news headline that they just saw
power has been restored.
My God.
And then they'll be excited after the whole holiday and the festivities are over.
Back to what it used to be.
So these are the issues that we have to look at. And then,
but you know that sometimes when we have absolute privatization in some of these sectors or some of these aspects, we get we see that it becomes very expensive for people to afford. Let's look at education. People have been calling for absolute, autonomy for these universities. And the lecturers have told us, in fact, as well as...
It's annoying. If you're meant to pay 1.5 for 4 units, for instance, and you have absolute access, you don't mind what you're paying for. That is... Nigerians want a Nigeria that
Depending
works.
on the individual. Remember, we have different classes when we talk about Nigerians.
I agree with you.
We have different set of people.
I agree with you,
People
but you
who
also
are
agree with
looking
me.
for a way to even eat twice a
You
day.
will also agree with me that as poor as the Akara woman, she has the heart desires of her children to send them to school. Let's use the varsities you mentioned. She has the absolute desire to send her children to school. And you begin to ask yourself, how did she manage to fry Akara and send her students? And she has 4 children, and they are all university graduates. And they come to salute her after NYSC. How did she manage to do that? There is a desire. Look, there's a driving force for Nigerians. Whenever it works, we don't...
Our explanation at the end of the day is just talking from the side of people who can afford these things.
I just mentioned an
Because
Akara
it's
woman
going to look like...
who is considered poor in the society.
It's going to look like we're dividing the country.
Okay.
So the people who can afford basic amenities and the people who cannot afford basic
Okay, let me add some spice to that I just said now. So if, for instance, the varsity procedures are privatized, or I'm not calling for privatization anyway, but he just mentioned that, autonomy and all of that. I'm very much against that, because I know that most of these people who are in power today are people who enjoyed Nigeria when university was absolutely free of charge. They were eating in school, they were feeding them, they were sleeping in hostels for free, and they come here to truncate the whole process and begin to complain in the reps and all of these senators. They are not...
So we'll talk about education, and you hit it more.
I feel that, for instance, if we say this cost, that's when the topic of subsidy comes in proper. You get the point? I'll use Germany as an example. In Germany, education is tuition free. You don't pay fees in Germany. But you know how expensive it is to do this education in Germany, for instance. But it is tuition free for citizens, for foreigners. Who is paying for this? Subsidy through the taxpayers' money. So Germany does not joke with tax. You don't owe a person's salary in Germany. They'll come for, the government will come for you, not the person. The government will come for you, because from the tax proceedings, the government is able to keep the state running. Germany runs a social system. You can't almost get poor that you cannot afford food in Germany. The state will cater for you, because things are working. Look, when you come to FIRS and all these places, they are taking tax every day. Where is taxpayers' money going to?
Big question.
Is it used to fund the luxurious lifestyles of politicians alone, while the taxpayers are suffering? They cannot have access to basic amenities. They have to cry and suffer and die.
If you're talking, sadly, but if you're talking about a subsidy now for electricity, are we still going to say that is absolute privatization? If the government is still coming in to pay subsidy?
If the process is privatized, then there is a hike in price, like you said, and some people are not able to meet up with it. The government can decide to subsidize supply.
So if it's possible, if you think it's possible and it's viable, right?
Yeah.
Why can't it be done now, even before the what you call absolute privatization?
We should ask the reps who are sitting
That's
down
a big question. Because if we're recommending, if we're making recommendations now concerning that, and we're hoping that that should be done at that time, something that can be done now, what is the change? What's the magic that's going to happen in the country that would all of a sudden make it possible?
You know, it has to do
so
with
that's already looking like, that's already looking like more hardship on the people, don't you think?
No, let me tell you something. Let's look at this. This thing is a chain.
Okay.
This is a power company. They are in charge of power installation, power distribution, power generation, and all. This is a power company. They are supplying to this state, for instance. Let's use River State. Now the government says, having done this power generation and everything, we are able to say, okay, we'll subsidize this to an extent.
Okay.
This power generating company is making money. They are paying tax back to the government. It's a chain, it's going round. They are paying tax back to the government. So the government is gaining from the power generating company, and of course, the power generating company is doing business. The power generating company, now the beautiful thing about privatization is that you will never want it to die off. I don't know if you get my point. You would never want that process to die off, because if it dies off, the business is going to die.
Okay.
So when I talk about privatization, my emphasis is more on the control of operations. Yes,
Right.
because when the operation controls are privatized, people are working, they know that if I don't work, if this thing doesn't work, this company is going to die off, it will fizzle out, and of course, we'll lose our staff, we'll close down, and then we'll file for bankruptcy.
Another thing from that aspect, from your explanation, is when it is privatized, or if it is privatized completely, like you have described it, would have various companies, and then there'll be competition, and then the price will drop.
Very healthy competition.
All right, let's move on to the next story. This is on fuel scarcity. We had reports from Dangote 2 days ago or yesterday, and then oil marketers have responded to that. Oil marketers have reached out to Dangote Petroleum Refinery, expressing their willingness to buy refined petroleum products from the $20 billion facility. This comes after Dangote's comment about the reluctance of marketers to source products from the refinery, which is located in Lekki, Lagos. Despite the refinery's operational capabilities, marketers represented by the Petroleum Retail Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria, Petron, and the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, claim that they face challenges in assessing fuel. How? Petron President Billy Gillis Harry stated that while they are eager to purchase petrol, they need to establish clear business arrangements with the refinery. He emphasized that they require a meeting to discuss how transactions would be conducted, as they cannot simply arrive at the refinery just to collect products like that without prior arrangement. Well, IPMAN's president, Abubakar Maigandi, echoed these concerns, highlighting difficulties faced by his members in loading fuel from the refinery, despite having made substantial payments through the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. I want you to hold that part I just read now. Despite having made substantial payments through NNPCL, they still cannot access these products. Now, many marketers, that's a complaint now, many marketers waited for days without being able to load any product, and some have revealed that Dangote Refinery is prioritizing sales to dealers with import licenses, causing further frustration among those without such permits. It's looking different from what reps had told us earlier when they said, oh, it is the marketers can actually purchase fuel from Dangote. Now, Dangote came out to say, oh, we have scarcity in Nigeria because some of these marketers would not buy from us. They prefer to import. Now, the thing is, if we go back, we'd find out that previously, marketers had said that it is very expensive to even import. So if they are leaving Dangote, who's in Nigeria, and importing, then we should also get to look at their concerns. So I would like to get your thoughts on this whole... Should I come?
First of all, the dots will connect backwards all the time. Let's start from there. There is quite some good news with the fact that we have been able to get a private refinery, which is the Dangote refinery. Now, the good news there is that it will help reduce the price.
It should help.
It should help. So that's why I say it could. It could help reduce the price of the petroleum
That's what
products.
a lot of us celebrated when we had that.
Now, have an imagination on your mind. If we had 3-4 private refineries of that capacity, you know how long they've been telling us the refinery in Port Harcourt is going to kickstart? It will kickstart January 2024. This is 1 day to November. 1 day to November. They keep shifting the deadlines. Can you imagine if it was a private-owned business? Do you think they will play politics with it? No. They will do everything within their power to ensure that the refinery works, because that is business for them. That is why I always like to talk about private control to an extent. It helps business in a climb like this. If we're a reasonable climb, private businesses will not thrive. If we're a reasonable climb, where things were done properly, Because if you go to other places, private businesses, they are struggling because the state-owned agencies
Businesses are
superb.
thriving. But how much do we even encourage these private investors?
You can
remember
ask
the issue
Dangote
with
the stress he
Dangote
went through.
and FG and
Exactly.
NNPCL.
All of these bureaucratic bottlenecks and then policy changes just to affect the next person and all. So imagine if we had 3, 4, 5 private refineries. Okay. Go to the main question. Dangote is saying, buy from me, you would be able to reduce the price of fuel and all of these petroleum
products won't have scarcity
if you buy from us, and there will not be scarcity. Do we have scarcity currently? I think what we have currently is hike in price.
Nigerians don't believe that we have scarcity.
There is no
driving
by here. There's no fuel
when we hear but when we hear from the marketers, we realize that there's some sort of scarcity. It probably hasn't gotten to us yet.
Okay, so when the marketers are saying there is some sort of scarcity, it probably means that very soon we will soon experience scarcity if they are not able to buy and get it down to their various stations. So probably we're enjoying the last lap of what they have in their stations. Who knows? But now, if the Dangote refinery has said buy from us, it's going to make this thing reduce in price. Of course, then the marketer should prioritize buying from the Dangote group. Now, the Dangote group has the responsibility of making this buying process a seamless one. I'm hearing from the news that they are not able to access it because some people have some import license, and because those people with import license are there, it's like the other people who are just coming to buy their local marketers, and of course we don't want to sell to local marketers.
Actually, they are.
At the end of the day, Dangote Group needs to bring up a seamless process of distribution of these petroleum products to the independent
You see some
marketers.
interest in this?
Nigeria is never without interest. You asked me some questions that you really know my answer. Nigeria is never without interest. Never without interest.
So you think there's some personal interest in what is going on with Dangote and the marketers?
Somewhere.
Not selling to certain people and selling to the others according to their claims.
Let me tell you why I believe there's always a private interest. There was a time, one of the cement producers, I think it was Boa Cement, went to meet the presidency and said he was going to crash down the price of cement. They agreed on the price of cement to be crashed. They agreed on the price. Boa Cement was selling, but the people were never getting it down there. It was just those people who were into road construction, the mega companies. It will finish before the product is out, they've already bought it. So there's always a vested interest in the Nigerian narrative, always a vested, and that's what always stalls our processes from going on smoothly. If people can, for once, extinguish personal interests and prioritize national interest,
but you know,
this
is let's hold on to what you just said now. Personal interest, national interest. This is a private business. And you don't expect the owner of a private business not to have his personal interest first.
In as much as it's a private business, you want to serve a nation.
Not just the nation. Dangote is not just serving Nigeria.
No, I agree with you. Dangote Group is a private group owned by Dangote himself and his investors.
Okay.
But Dangote Group fronts alliance and allegiance with the Nigerian force. If he's not going to be thoughtful about Nigerians, then he should take the refinery to some other African country and then serve their interests. But because when you hear him speak on national TV, you always hear him call that Nigerian alliance.
What do you expect?
So if you are going to call the Nigerian alliance, then have the Nigerian people in mind.
But is Dangote the issue here?
You just mentioned the private interest of Dangote.
Yes, I said individuals, like when they have a business. But let's look at the picture now. Is Dangote really the issue here? Let's start from, okay, let me mention the reasons I'm asking that question. Let's start from the price, right? Okay. When we saw that Dangote, we celebrated the whole refinery and all of that. And then we saw the price. Nigerians were surprised that we didn't expect this price. We expected that it would be way below this. And then by the time it gets to us, even though they've been having back and forth talk about the price, this one say, this is the price, Dangote will say, no, that's not the price we mentioned and all of that. But with the price, do you think that there's some influence, external influence, concerning some of the activities that are going on with Dangote and the marketers?
Like I said, there are influences down there, which we may not be able to give you an exact pointer to say, oh, this place, because we don't want to call any names or say this place is influencing this or that. There are influences down there. At the end of the day, I feel that the presidency also has a role to play in this whole thing. When I spoke one time, some time ago, about this issue of petrol, I think I mentioned something. I said, if the president was quite thoughtful, he would not just come and declare fuel subsidy gone. He would have sat down with a committee, discussed this process, and agreed on a pump price. Now, mind you, most times when the pump price is agreed on, it only affects probably the NNPC fuel stations and the government-owned fuel stations. So when you're having such a meeting, you don't just have the government interests represented. You also have the independent marketers. Because of course, I won't buy something for 10,000 and sell it for 8,000. I'll buy for 10,000. I'll have to add some profit to it. So the independent marketers will come into that kind of meeting, and then we agree on a pump price that goes down for everybody. Whether Dangote refinery or not, there should be.
I think we can crash the price of fuel right now. Let's talk about moving forward.
Proper decision making. First, more private refineries. Proper decision making.
I'm surprised you're not talking about making the government refineries functional.
We've been crying about government refineries getting functional, and I just gave you an example. The Buhari regime.
So you're giving up
the Buhari regime
on the functionality of our refineries?
Buhari regime was for 8 years. They promised the functionality of the Port Harcourt refinery. I want to use the one that is close to us here. It didn't work for 8 years. When Tinubu came into power, one of the very first promises that was made was Port Harcourt refinery will work by January 2024. We're in November by tomorrow. 9 good years gone. It's not working. But you quite agree with me that if a private investor comes in to partner with the government, even if it's not 100% ownership to the private investor, and say, this is it. Government will bring their own quota and say, this is it. Okay, we need $10 billion to make the refinery work. We've brought 5, you brought 5.
All right.
Let it work.
Thank you very much, great man. At this point, we'll take some time off, just a very short break, and we'll be back to continue the show. We have other stories for you. Please stay with us.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over a wreck of deadly diseases, and medical facilities are out of commission. The situation is dire. Helicopters, boats, and high-riding trucks capable of navigating the treacherous, waterlogged areas are urgently required to reach the countless men, women, and children still awaiting rescue. The Nigerian media is issuing a desperate plea to the government, humanitarian organizations, international actors, and citizens across the nation. Step in now, before it's too late. For more information on how you can help, contact Professor Usman A. Tar, the Honorable Commissioner for Information and Internal Security, Borno State, on 0809-233-3955. Every second counts.
This is powered by Atlantic Television Network.
appreciate you for staying with us. Thank you so much. We move to our next story. We are back. Our next story is talking about NANS education. Well, the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, has threatened protests in southwest Nigerian tertiary institutions lacking functional student union, calling the ban on such activity. Coordinator Lewa Taiwo criticized the absence of unions in schools like Federal Polytechnic Ede, Osun